Well, so good to have all of you with us today. My name is Chris, and we're in part 3 of the series, Camouflage, standing out when blending in seems better. And if you missed part 1 or part 2, or maybe this is your first time connecting in online, Facebook, at one of our physical campuses, I just want to encourage you, go back and watch part 1 and 2, and you can find it right here at tcconline.tv/camouflage, or even easier, just text the word camouflage to 833-709-0962, and make sure you put the U in camouflage. Make sure you do that. In fact, I would just encourage you, if you have not saved this number yet, 833-709-0962, save it right now into your phone, into your contacts, because we use it all the time, because we want to keep simple ways, simple steps for you to take steps on your spiritual journey. So in fact, if you want to take a step into a life group, all you would have to do is text the word group to 833-709-0962. If you want to join and lead with us on one of our teams, just text the word serve to 833-709-0962. If you want to take a step in your generosity journey and give digitally, online, safe and secure, all you have to do is text the word give to 833-709-0962. In fact, if you've seen people wearing those awesome TCC camo sweatshirts or the gray sweatshirts, they're brand new. All you have to do is text the word merch to 833-709-0962. We'll send you the link and you can get all that. And plus, there's so many other ways. So save that number. And we just, again, want to partner with you on your spiritual journey. Well, this entire series is focused primarily on one person. His name's Jacob. Now, it's really about his entire family, but his mom and dad and twin brother are more supporting characters, and Jacob is the main character. And that kind of the main tension point in the whole story of Jacob, at least the part we're going to be looking at, is surrounding these two components, the birthright and the blessing. In part 2, we looked at the part of the story surrounding the birthright. The birthright was usually given to the oldest son, but not all the time. And with the birthright came a lot of wealth. Usually they got a double portion or more of the inheritance. And it came a lot of power, prestige, influence, because the person with the birthright became the leader of the entire family when the father passed away. Well, Esau, the older of the two brothers, had come back from a hunting trip, and he was famished. He was completely exhausted, weary, mentally and physically from being out on a hunt. And he came in and he wanted a bowl of lentil bean stew that Jacob had been making. And Jacob sees his moment and is like, I'll give you a bowl of stew if you give me your birthright. And Esau, being famished, being weary, being exhausted, being fatigued, said, okay. He said yes to the bowl of now, ignoring the future that was already in his hands. And you see, this is something for all of us to pay attention to, not just a story attached to Jacob and Esau. You see, when you are weary, impulsive decisions rise. When you are weary, now intensifies. And we're in the season where all of us are weary, exhausted, fatigued, and we should pay attention, because if not, we're going to keep making now decisions with a bowl of now and miss out on God's perfect future that he does have for you and he does have for me. Well, Jacob gets the birthright, and then he sets his sights on the blessing. And the blessing was kind of a last will and testament. It was something that was given, usually again to the oldest son, from the father, right before the father passed away. And the blessing, it created this unique connection between God and the person with the blessing. You see, how God has led throughout the course of time has been different. So during the times of the patriarchs, God would only talk directly to the head of the household, the person with the blessing. But that shifted. I mean, God then started talking through with the judges, and then he led through the kings. He tried to at least, and then through with the prophets. And then, well, Jesus came, and then Jesus, set in motion in a church, a gathering of people, you and me, that has God the Spirit guiding and leading us. God is led in all different ways. But during this season of the patriarchs, again, the times of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God would talk directly to the person, the head of the household, the person with the blessing. And Jacob wanted the blessing as well. One of the questions I've asked every week is the question, how messy is your family? I know my family is messy. I know your family is messy. Well, Jacob's family, has set the bar of messiness. And one of these quick little insights that we looked at in part 2 is that Isaac, dad, loved Esau, liked Esau, valued Esau more than his son Jacob. And Rebecca, mom, loved, liked, valued Jacob more than Esau. And this is something everyone knew within their family, and everyone around their family understood this, and it created such a mess. Well, Isaac, the dad, was getting old in his age. His eyesight has literally gone, and he summons Esau and says, hey, Esau, why don't you go out on a hunt? Because Esau was an outdoors man. And he goes, go out on a hunt and bring me back some of that tasty food. And when you come back with that tasty food, I will give you the blessing. So Esau leaves on the hunt. Rebecca, the mother, overhears this conversation. She comes to her favorite, Jacob, and says, hey, Jacob, now is the time to get the blessing from your dad. Now is the time. You got to seize this moment. If not, he's going to give it to Esau. So, mother and son concoct a plan to get the blessing. The first step was, we got to get dad, Isaac, some tasty food. So Jacob went and got a couple young goats to prepare the food. And then they're like, you got to at least dress up. His eyesight is almost gone, but you need to at least dress up like your brother. So, Jacob goes and gets Esau's best outfit and puts it on. And as he's putting it on, they realize, Isaac's eyesight's almost gone, but he might reach out and touch you, Jacob. And if he does that, your brother's really hairy. You're not hairy, but Esau's hairy, covered in hair. And so their idea was to get some goat skins, and Jacob put those goat skins all over his body. And Jacob goes into his dad with the tasty food, deceives his dad, and Isaac gives the blessing to Jacob, thinking it was Esau, but still gives it to Jacob. Rebecca, Jacob, they knew at some point their little scheme would come to the surface because Esau would come home at some point. And one day, Esau comes home, talks with his dad, and they both discover what had taken place. And Isaac says, your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing. And Esau, in one of these no duh dad moments, says, hey, dad, isn't he rightly named Jacob? Which literally means deceiver, supplanter. He's like, no duh, dad. Well, what did you expect? Jacob did what he's always been doing. He's been deceiving. And Esau is outraged. But what Esau says next is something that we can learn a lot from. That's something that could possibly change the course of your life. You see, what happens next, we're told that this was the second time he had been taken advantage of. But it's what Esau says next that we need to pay attention to. He goes, he took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing. Technically, he took the blessing. He deceived to get it. But did Jacob really take the birthright? Think back to the story. Jacob just said, hey, I have a bowl of stew for you. I'll trade you. Give me the birthright, you can have stew. If not, oh well. He didn't take it. Yeah, did he manipulate the situation? Sure. Did he structure the situation to favor what he wanted? Sure. Did he do a little conniving, scheming? Yeah, he did. But did he take it? No. Did he force Esau? No. Did he strong-arm Esau? No. You see, we got to pay attention to this because in a short period of time, Esau started to change the storyline. He's like, oh, no, my brother took it. Not really, Esau. I want to share with you two cautions. And these two cautions are going to be followed up with, well, just several practical insights to help you lead you through any season of life. The first caution is this. Don't skew the narrative to fit your point of view. We all do this. We get into a messy situation, and maybe you cause all the mess, part of the mess, some of the mess, a little part of it, it doesn't matter. We get into it, and we start to change the narrative to, well, protect us. We change the narrative to make us look better. We change the narrative to make us feel less guilty. We change the narrative to, well, put the blame on other people and we'll take much less blame. We do that. This is what Esau's doing. He's like, he took my birthright. No. He just offered a bowl of stew for the birthright. You chose to trade. But already he started to skew the storyline to fit, well, what he wanted the story to say. And here's the thing, we all can do that. But we need to recognize that we all have the propensity to do that. Which leads to the second caution. The blame game always ends the same way. It always ends in a mess. It always ends in fractured relationships. It always ends in one of those like black holes that you get sucked in and you're like, how did I get here? It's like, well, yeah, when we start blaming everyone else and everything else, right, it just spins us into a tailspin. That's what the blame game does. We're living in a day and age where everyone is blaming everyone. It's everyone else's fault. And where does that lead you? What's the end point of blame? The end point of blame is a mess filled with more blame and more blame and more blame and more blame. So how do we lead ourselves? And that's so important. How do you lead you? Because remember, you follow you wherever you go. So how do you lead you through messy, difficult, complicated, multifaceted seasons of life? How do you? Let me ask a question. What can I learn from this situation? You got to start there. And that's kind of a benign question. I'll get to a much more pointed question. But just when you start here, when you recognize in any situation, doesn't matter the situation, no matter how messy, how broken, how hurt you are, no matter the situation, when you have a posture to say, hey, there's something in every situation I can learn from. When you start here, you have a posture of learning. You have a posture of growth. You have a posture to say, hey, maybe I don't have this all figured out, and maybe I need to lean into a difficult, a messy, a broken, a fractured situation, relationship. I need to lean into this, and there's something I can learn. So you start there with a posture to say, I'm just going to live a life in a posture to learn, to grow. So you start there. Then you get to this question. What % do I own? Now, this is a difficult question. Because you're going to have to face you. But remember, you can't change anyone else. And blaming everyone else will never help you grow. Never. You got to ask the question. In the situation, in the broken situation, in the situation filled with hurt, in the messy situation, whatever the specific situation you're thinking of right now, you got to ask yourself, what percentage do I own? Out of all of that, what do I own? What's my piece? Because as you get clarity around the percentage that you own, now you get clarity around the exact specifics that you have to hold on to. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, well Chris, no, you don't know my situation. I had nothing to do with it. It was all that person. Remember, the blame game always ends the same way. Even in that type of situation, maybe, the percentage is, 0.00001%. And I think I got all those zeros in. And maybe that's really all you own in the situation. But when you lock in on that 0.00001%, when you lock in on that, you get clarity on what that actually is that you can hold on to, that you can learn from, you can grow from. When you see clearly what that is, now, this is powerful. Don't miss it. Own 100% of it. 100% of it. Whatever percent of the situation, of the relationship, of the mess, whatever percentage you own, because you can't own anything else. You can't own it for another person. You can't even make other people own their percentage. You can't do that. All you can do is what do you own? And when you get clarity around that percentage and what that percentage represents, then you got to own 100%. And here's the thing about the 100%. When you get clarity about the 100% of the percent you're going to own in any messy situation, when you get that 100%, you're clear about it, 3 simple steps. First thing, you got to let it permeate you. You got to stare at it. You got to let it sink in. You got to let it get into every nook and crevice within your mind and your emotions and your soul. You got to let it. You got to own it. This is what I mean. Don't just blink at it. Don't just kind of look at it and swipe it away. No. You got to let that 100% of whatever percent you're owning in any messy situation, you got to own it. Let it permeate. And you'll know it's permeating by the second one. You'll know it. When it's really permeating within you, guess what's going to happen? It's going to frustrate you. You're going to get frustrated, not at the other person. See, this is what starts to shift. You're going to get frustrated with you. Oh, man. I emotionally responded out of anger. I shouldn't have done that. I was standing in a circle, and I was just so sarcastic. I tried to couch it in humor and laughter and a joke, but in all reality, I was spewing venom. Man, I said I would, and I didn't. And I own that. You see, when you own 100% and you allow that to permeate every part of you, then you start getting frustrated with you. Now, don't stay there too long. Because if you stay there too long, then you're going to start focusing on the failure, and then you're going to call yourself a failure. And once you call yourself a failure, now you're spiraling. Remember, you can fail and not be a failure. We all fail. The thing is are we going to learn and grow, which gets us to the third step. Got to get to the cultivating stage. How are you going to grow through this? What are you going to learn through this messy situation? The percentage that you own in any broken relationship, in any messy situation. How are you growing? And this is a step where you need to invite someone wise in with you, someone you trust, a mentor, a life group leader, someone that you know they're on a pathway of growth and maturity. Remember, just because you're getting older in years doesn't mean you're getting wiser. Just because you're growing older doesn't mean you're maturing. Age, maturity, nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with how are you growing yourself. That's why in any situation, you got to get clarity around the percentage of the situation that you own. And own that percent. No more. Don't own more than another person. Like they got to own their percentage. But you got to own your percentage with 100%. And then let it permeate you. Let it frustrate you. And then let it cultivate you. Let it grow you. And here's the thing. Esau did none of that. None of it. Like he didn't pause and own anything. No. His brother took it. It was everyone else's fault. The blame game always ends the same way. So Esau's infuriated. And he goes, the days of mourning for my father are near, meaning Isaac's about ready to die. Dad is about ready to die. He goes, and when dad dies, then I will kill my brother. He owns nothing. He's not growing. He's not maturing. He's blaming everyone else. And now anger is controlling not just his words, but his actions. Well, Rebekah hears what her son, Esau, was going to do to her favorite, Jacob. And she goes to Jacob and says, hey, your brother's going to kill you. So Jacob goes running for his life. And we read that he gets to a certain place where he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. Not real comfortable. I mean, a stone for a pillow, isn't that great? But as he was sleeping, he had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth. With its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and well, he said, I'm the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac, and I will give you and your descendants a land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like that of the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. What God was saying to Jacob, say, hey, Jacob, the covenant that I made with your grandfather, Abraham, the covenant, the promise that God extended to Abraham, that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars of the sky. Hey, Jacob, that promise, that covenant has gone through Abraham, through your father Isaac, and now to you. And what God says next to Jacob, it's the same thing he's saying to you. God says, I'm with you and watch over you wherever you go, and I'll bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. Think about the progression of what God is saying here. And again, God is saying this to you. God says, I am with you. What is God saying? I'm present. I mean, Jacob's in the midst of his mess, a mess largely he created. He's on the run for his life. And God's like, hey, in the midst of your mess, Jacob, I'm with you. I'm present. Then God says, I'll watch over you. Hey, Jacob, I want you to know I'm going to protect you. And remember, sometimes God wants us to walk through the valley. Sometimes, we create the scenario to walk through the valley. But remember that whether we caused it or God's like, no, this is just the road you got to walk through right now. God's saying, I'm present with you and I will protect you. And then God says, I will bring you back. God is a God that has a purpose. It's like, hey, Jacob, right now your life is wandering. Right now, your life has ups and downs and twists and turns and more downs and more twists than anything. But remember, Jacob, and this is the thing you got to hold on to, that God has a purpose for your life. Even if you're in a mess right now, and maybe it's a mess that you've created, guess what? God's like, hey, I still have a purpose for you. And then God said, I won't leave you. God is a God who promises us. And guess what? God always follows through. No matter the mess you're in right now, God is present. No matter the mess you're in right now, God's protecting. No matter the mess you're in right now, God still has a purpose for your life. No matter the mess you're in, just know you can count on God's promises for your life. Well, Jacob wakes up from his sleep, and he goes, man, surely the Lord is in this place. And then he goes, and I wasn't even aware of it. And he says, so transparent. Why wasn't Jacob aware of it? He was running for his life. Fear consumed him. The mess he created consumed him. He knew his dad was about ready to die, and he deceived his dad for a blessing. Like the whole situation. He found himself by himself, and God shows up, and he goes, God is here with me, and I wasn't even aware of it. Guess what, for you have to understand that God meets you in the midst of your mess. Maybe you've always believed, like, I got to get some things cleaned up in my life. My life right now is too messy, and if I start to unmess my mess, then maybe God would speak to me. Maybe God will show up in my life. Maybe God will guide me. Maybe God will do something nice for me. But I got to clean up my life first, then God will. But that's not the story we find throughout the Bible. God is a God who meets us in the midst of our own mess, and he shows up in it. He says, I love you. And I'm present with you. I have a purpose for you. I'm going to protect you. And my promises will always come true. God meets you and me right in the midst of our mess. Well, Jacob, we're told that he was afraid, but this wasn't like afraid, like scary movie afraid. This word afraid or fear is actually translated reverence or awe. And we see this come to play of what he says next. So he's in awe, he's in reverence that God is in this place. And he goes, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And then early the next morning, Jacob took the stone that he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it, and he called that place Bethel. You see what's incredible for me? When I think about this part of Jacob's story, in the midst of nowhere, because Bethel was in the midst of nowhere. He was by himself, using a rock for a pillow, spending a night thinking about what he had just done, what his life had become, in the midst of nowhere. God shows up. That God is now here. See, maybe you're in a season where you're in the land of nowhere, and you're thinking to yourself, no one cares, no one's by me, no one even wants. And what you got to hold on to is what Jacob discovered, that in the midst of nowhere, God was now here. See, 20 years later, Jacob's been on the run. He's wrestled with God. God's dislocated his hip. He's walking with a limp. And 20 years later, guess what happens? Jacob goes, then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, the God who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. 20 years later, Jacob looks back. It's like, in the messiest moment of my life, when I wasn't even aware of it, God was there. And that's true for you. It's true for you. No matter how big a mess you have created, no matter what percentage you own, you have to know God is present right in the midst of your mess. When you walked into one of our campuses, or if you're connecting online, you're encouraged to grab a piece of paper. The first one you crumpled up in a ball and you threw. Well, get the second one. Now, if you don't have a second one, if you're at a physical campus, just slip up your hand. We'll get you a second one. If you're sitting online, just grab any old piece of paper will work. Doesn't matter what type of paper it is, but grab that second piece of paper. And right now, we're going to give you 120 seconds, 120 seconds to focus on you. The first question is, what percentage do you own? That's a question that's going to kick off this 120 seconds. The current mess you're in, the current broken relationship you're in, the current leadership dysfunction that you're in. What percentage do you own? And write that percentage down. Just write the percentage. And as you write that percentage down, focus on the specifics that get attached to that percentage. And then there's one more step that you'll see here in about 60 seconds. But focus on you. What percentage do you own?